isn't the biggest house. Many are, and most, in even smaller countries, are much bigger. This isn't the finest house, but this is the best house. It's the best house because it has something far more important than numbers of people who serve, far more important than numbers of rooms or how big it is, far more important than numbers of magnificent pieces of art. This house has a great heart, and that heart comes from those who serve.
I was inspired to make this video when I had heard that former President Trump was bragging about the fact, well, I'd walk down the hallway where Abraham Lincoln walked. Well, unfortunately, that isn't true, because that hallway was demolished in 1949 when there was a total reconstruction of the White House. You see, the only thing that exists today, and a lot of people don't realize this, is that the only thing that exists today of the original White House, okay, is the exterior facade and a lot of the interior furniture. Because, and it all started when America engaged in its first invasion, and of course that was the invasion of Canada, which started the War of 1812, and we ended up getting our asses kicked by the British to where both the White House and the Capitol, along with other government buildings, were burned down. And, you know, I mean, the whole war was the same kind of thing like the run-up to Iraq. And, oh, we've got to fulfill our manifest destiny. Well, anyway, getting into that, let me get through here. This is some of the damage you can see from the burning of the White House in the War of 1812. Severely damaged, and they didn't have the same reconstruction techniques, of course, that we do today. Now, it came when Margaret Truman's piano leg fell through the second floor to the first floor, and so they had to totally gut the whole White House. See? Where's that hall, Cousin Trump? Where's the Lincoln hallway? I don't see any hallway here. See? There's no hallway. It was completely gutted. Our White House is basically a building that was built in the 1950s. And I present to you Exhibit A and B, and you will see how degraded, the interior was in this next image. Here it is. I mean, it's awful, absolutely awful. There were rats all over the place. The beams were cracking. And of course, from the fire, a lot of the beams still were partially burned in it. And so everything had to be done. And even up into the Kennedy administration, they were still working on it. And as you'll see here is a little bit of where Jacqueline Kennedy, the First Lady, gives the famous, so-called White House tour. So here you go.
And also in this room is where Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation.
On the deck?
Now you see, that's wrong because, again, during the White House construction in 1949 to 1952, that room was totally destroyed. The correct statement is it is a recreation of the room where Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation with all of the original furniture there. But again, she's like, Donald Trump going, I walked down the hall where Abraham Lincoln walked. Sorry, wrong. D.C. is basically a marshland. And the White House's foundation was even more severely damaged, not only from the War of 1812 when it burned, but after the Civil War, after Lincoln, all of the presidents had to have their secret tunnels. So each of them, they had to build their own special secret tunnel. They had their own wine cellar or their playroom or whatever they wanted, a library or an office. So they all had to have a tunnel. And even at the time of the early part of the Cold War. So that degraded the White House's foundation even more. So that was another factor. Now, this gentleman that's coming up here has an excellent documentary all about the White House construction, and I'm going to have a link in the description for you on that. Lyndon Johnson, President Johnson, gave his famous civil rights speech. It's rumored up at a party in the residential section of the White House that he told a dirty joke in reference to congressional reaction and cheering to his speech. And it was portrayed in a film, and thought you might like to hear it.
Okay. Bye. Is that Arthur Krim online?
Oh, no, sir. No, I can't. No, sir. No. You know, boys, I'm reminded tonight of Texas hill country in spring.
Oh, Lennon, your guests are far too weird. Appreciate your poetry.
Now, let me tell you boys about the hill country in spring.
Good
You
night.
see, oh,
Good night, all.
good night, Mr. Jordan.
Good night.
Now,
Lucy.
in spring.
Lucy, come with me. Good night. Good night.
Good night. Good night, Mr. Johnson.
Good night.
Good night.
In spring, in the hill country, the sun is up early and the ground gets warmer. And you can see the steam rising, the sap dripping. And in his pen, there's my prize bull. Now, he is the biggest, best hung bull. Well, in the spring, that bull gets a hankering for them cows, and he starts pawing the ground, getting restless. So I open up the pen, and he goes down the hill with his pecker hanging hard and swinging. Well, those cows get so goddamn excited, they get more and more moist towards the evening. And their asses just start quivering. They start quivering over, every one of them is quivering. And as that bull struts into their pasture, oh, boys, we had him quivering tonight.
We know him as former President Clinton. I like to know him as presidential and White House historian William Jefferson Clinton. It is jaw-dropping, and I mean jaw-dropping, the amount of historical presidential history and White House history that former President Clinton knows. He is a real credit. And with that, we will see you in the next clip.